Nobody told us to stop. There was no announcement on the BBC. No government pamphlet slipped through the letterbox saying the old ways were finished. But somewhere between the first microwave landing on a kitchen counter and the last proper butcher closing on the high street, we quietly abandoned 25 rituals that made the British Sunday roast the most important meal of the week. Not just the food, the rules, the timing, the unspoken choreography that turned a simple joint of meat into an event the whole family orbited around. Number 17 on this list was so universal that 9 out of 10 households did it unquestioned, yet today, most people under 40 have never even heard of it. And number 5 was a technique so precise that getting it wrong could ruin the entire meal. Before we start, hit subscribe, because these rituals are disappearing fast, and once the last generation who remembers them is gone, they are gone forever. Number 25. Saturday night preparation. The Sunday roast did not begin on Sunday. It began on Saturday evening, often before the television was switched on. Your mum would take the joint out of the fridge, unwrap the greaseproof paper from the butcher, and set it on a plate to come to room temperature overnight. In the 1970s, a decent topside cost about 80 pence a pound, and she treated that meat with the reverence it deserved. She would check the larder for bisto, count the potatoes, and mentally plan the timing of every dish so they would all land on the table at exactly 1 o'clock. The carrots were peeled and left soaking in cold water. Some mothers laid the tablecloth on Saturday night so it was ready. That ritual of quiet preparation, standing alone in the kitchen while the rest of the house watched Match of the Day, set the tone for everything. The roast was not a meal you threw together. It was a performance. And Saturday night was the dress rehearsal. Number 24. The butcher's order. Your mum did not pick up meat from a refrigerated shelf under fluorescent lights. She stood in a queue at the butcher's shop, sometimes for 20 minutes, and placed her order face to face. The butcher knew her name, knew whether she liked her beef rolled or on the bone, and knew how many mouths she was feeding. He would hold up the joint for her approval before wrapping it in greaseproof and brown paper, tied with string. That string mattered. It told you the meat came from a proper shop. By 1975, there were still over 25,000 independent butchers in Britain. She might ask him to score the pork skin for crackling, or to leave extra fat on the lamb. He would throw in a marrow bone for stock if she was a regular. That personal transaction, the conversation, the judgment, the pride in choosing the right cut, vanished when supermarkets took over the meat counter. We traded expertise for convenience and lost something no barcode could replace. Number 23. Rendering dripping from the tin. After the joint came out to rest, the roasting tin held liquid gold. Your mum would tilt the tin carefully, spooning off the clear fat into a ceramic bowl and leaving behind the dark, caramelized meat juices for gravy. That dripping was never wasted. It went into a jar on the side of the cooker, saved for roasting potatoes the following week, or spread on toast for Monday's tea. The dripping jar was as permanent a fixture as the kettle. The ritual of separating fat from juices was a skill passed from mother to daughter without a single word of instruction. You just watched and learned. By the mid-1970s, health campaigns had begun their assault on animal fats, and the dripping jar started to disappear. Families threw it away feeling virtuous, not realizing they were replacing it with processed oils that would later prove far worse. Number 22. The gravy ritual. Gravy was not granules. Gravy was a ceremony. Your mum would set the roasting tin directly on the hob over a low flame, scraping up the crusty brown bits stuck to the bottom with a wooden spoon. She would sprinkle in a tablespoon of plain flour, stirring fast to stop lumps, then slowly add the vegetable water she had saved from boiling the carrots and cabbage. That water was never thrown down the sink. She might add half a crumbled OXO cube if the drippings were thin, dissolving it first in a splash of boiling water. The gravy had to be thick enough to coat the back of the spoon, but thin enough to pour from the jug. Too thick, and the children complained. Too thin, and your dad would raise an eyebrow. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes, but it required the kind of attention that cannot be replicated by boiling a kettle and stirring brown powder. Sunday lunch was the only meal of the week that demanded the good plates. Your mum would pull out the dinner service, often a wedding present or inherited from a grandmother, and lay the table with a pressed white or cream tablecloth. Placemats were set. The cruet appeared. The gravy boat took its position. In some homes there were even cloth napkins folded beside the plates. This was not showing off. This was respect for the occasion. The message was clear. Sunday dinner mattered more than any other meal, and the table had to reflect that. Children knew that spilling gravy on the good cloth meant trouble. The ritual of laying the table properly, knives on the right, forks on the left, serving spoon beside the dish, taught children formality and care without a single lecture. When paper napkins and mismatched plates replaced the china, something ceremonial died. The food might taste the same, but it stopped feeling special. Number 20. The 1 o'clock rule. Sunday roast was served at 1 o'clock. Not 2:30, not 1:45. 1 o'clock. This was not a suggestion. It was a law as rigid as anything passed through Parliament. The entire morning was structured around that deadline. Your mum calculated backwards from 1 o'clock to determine when the meat went in, when the potatoes went around the joint, when the veg went on, and when the Yorkshire pudding batter got its final whisk. Church finished at 12. The pub shut at 2. The whole village moved to the same clock. If you were late to the table, the food went cold and the atmosphere went colder. There were no reheated plates, no saving a portion for later. You sat down at 1, or you explained yourself. That rigid timing created a shared rhythm across the whole country. Millions of families eating the same meal at the same hour. It was the closest thing Britain had to a national ceremony. Number 19. Meat resting under foil. When the joint came out of the oven, your mum did not carve it straight away. She set it on a board, covered it loosely with a sheet of aluminium foil, and left it alone for at least 15 minutes. Sometimes she would drape a clean tea towel over the foil for extra insulation. During this resting time, the juices redistributed through the meat, ensuring every slice was tender and moist rather than dry and chewy. That 15-minute window was sacred. No one was allowed to prod the meat, peek under the foil, or ask if it was ready yet. Your mum used those minutes to make the gravy, drain the vegetables, and bring everything to the table. Modern cooks sometimes skip it because they are impatient. But every housewife in the 1970s knew that those quiet minutes under foil were the difference between a good roast and a perfect one. Number 18. Father carving at the table. The carving of the joint was not done in the kitchen. It was done at the table, by your father, with a proper carving knife and a 2-pronged fork. This was his moment, his one culinary contribution to the meal. He would stand at the head of the table, sharpening the knife on a steel with theatrical strokes while the family watched. The first slice was always the most important. Too thick, and the joint would not stretch to seconds. Too thin, and it looked mean. Plates were passed down the table in order. Father first for the outside cut, mother next, then children from eldest to youngest. The ritual reinforced hierarchy without a word being spoken. When joints started being carved in the kitchen and plated up, that moment of theatre and authority disappeared from the dining room forever. Number 17. Yorkshire pudding with everything. It did not matter if you were serving beef, lamb, pork, or chicken. Yorkshire pudding appeared on the plate regardless. In the 1970s, this was not a debate. This was simply what you did. The batter was always the same. Mum made the batter hours in advance, sometimes the night before, letting it rest in the fridge so the flour hydrated and the puddings rose taller. 4 ounces of flour, 2 eggs, half a pint of milk, and a pinch of salt. She would heat the fat in the tin until it was smoking, pour the batter in fast, and slam the oven door shut. Nobody opened that door for 20 minutes. Not for any reason. The puddings had to rise golden and crisp with soft custardy centers. Some families used a single large tin. Others used individual patty tins. The Yorkshire was the barometer of the meal. If the Yorkshires rose, everything was right with the world. If they sank, the whole dinner felt diminished. A survey in 1978 found that more than 90% of British families served Yorkshire pudding with their Sunday roast regardless of the meat. Today, the idea that Yorkshire pudding belongs only with beef would have baffled your grandmother completely. Your mum never threw away the water she boiled vegetables in. That cloudy, greenish liquid went straight into the gravy or was saved in a jug for soup on Monday. Carrots, cabbage, swede, parsnips, whatever went into the pot, the cooking water was kept. The water held dissolved vitamins and minerals, plus a subtle sweetness that enriched everything it touched. In some homes, the potato water was saved separately because it made the best base for bread dough. The idea of pouring all that goodness down the drain would have horrified any housewife of the 1970s. When steaming became fashionable in the 1990s, the vegetable water tradition died quietly. Nobody mourned it because nobody remembered it was happening. Coleman's English mustard was mixed fresh for every Sunday roast, not squeezed from a tube, not spooned from a jar. It was mixed from powder in a tiny pot, usually a special mustard dish with its own small spoon. Your mum would put a teaspoon of bright yellow powder into the pot, add a few drops of cold water, then stir until it formed a smooth, fiery paste. It had to be made no more than 10 minutes before serving, because the heat faded quickly once mixed. That fresh mustard was so potent it could clear your sinuses with a single dab. The ritual of mixing it at the last minute meant someone was always assigned the job, often the eldest child, who felt important performing this small but essential task. Ready-made mustard from a jar carries none of the ceremony or the searing intensity that made Coleman's powder the Sunday roast's secret weapon. Number 14. The roast potato hierarchy. Not all roast potatoes were equal, and everyone at the table knew it. The ones from the edges of the tin, dark and crunchy with a shattering crust and a fluffy interior, were the prize. The ones from the middle, softer and paler, were acceptable, but never fought over. Your mum would parboil the potatoes for exactly 7 minutes, drain them and shake the colander hard to rough up the edges. Those rough edges were everything. They caught the hot fat and turned into the crispy bits that made people close their eyes when they bit in. She would heat the fat in the roasting tin until it shimmered, then lay each potato in carefully, turning them once halfway through cooking. The sound of potatoes hitting hot dripping was the overture to Sunday lunch. Children would hover near the oven asking if they were ready. Your dad would sneak one from the tin when your mum was not looking. The meat was important, but it was the potatoes that people remembered. Number 13. Mint sauce from scratch. Your mum did not buy mint sauce in a jar. She went to the garden, picked a fistful of fresh mint from the patch by the back door, and chopped it fine on a wooden board. The mint went into a small jug with a tablespoon of sugar, 2 tablespoons of boiling water to dissolve the sugar and release the oils, then a splash of malt vinegar. The result was sharp, sweet, and intensely fresh. Nothing like the lurid green paste in a commercial jar. Every family had a mint patch. It grew like a weed, impossible to kill and always ready for Sunday. The smell of freshly chopped mint mixed with vinegar was as much a part of Sunday as church bells. Making mint sauce was often the first cooking task given to a child. When jarred mint sauce took over, we lost a ritual that connected the garden to the plate in 5 minutes. Number 12. The gravy boat procession. Gravy was never poured from a saucepan. It was transferred into a gravy boat, a porcelain vessel with a lip and a handle, often matching the dinner service. The gravy boat was carried to the table with the same care as a christening cup. It sat on a saucer to catch drips, and it was passed clockwise around the table so each person could pour their own. The amount of gravy you took was noticed. Too much and you were greedy. Too little, and your mum would insist you have more. Some families had 2 boats, one at each end of the table to prevent arguments. The gravy boat represented civilization. It said that this family did not eat from pots and pans. This family had standards. When gravy started being poured over food in the kitchen before plating, the table lost one of its last acts of shared ceremony. Number 11. Applesauce made on the morning. If pork was the joint, applesauce appeared alongside it, made fresh that morning from Bramley apples pulled off the tree in the back garden or bought loose from the greengrocer. Your mum would peel, core, and chop 4 or 5 large apples, then simmer them with a tablespoon of sugar and a knob of butter until they collapsed into a rough puree. No cinnamon, no vanilla, just apple, sugar, and butter. The tartness cut through the richness of the pork fat like nothing else could. That batch sat in a small dish on the table, warm and fragrant. A jar of Coleman's from the cupboard was considered acceptable by some families, but never by the ones who had a Bramley tree. Homemade applesauce took 15 minutes, cost almost nothing, and turned a simple pork roast into something that tasted like autumn itself. Number 10. Bread sauce for chicken. When chicken was the Sunday joint, which in the 1970s was still a relatively special occasion, at around 35 pence a pound, bread sauce appeared beside it. Your mum would stud a peeled onion with 4 or 5 whole cloves, place it in a saucepan of milk, and heat gently for 20 minutes to infuse. Then she would remove the onion, stir in fresh white breadcrumbs, a knob of butter, and a pinch of white pepper. The result was a thick, creamy, warmly spiced sauce that clung to every forkful of chicken. Bread sauce was uniquely British. No other country made it. The combination of clove-infused milk and soft bread created something between a sauce and a stuffing, deeply savory and utterly comforting. When ready-made bread sauce appeared in jars in the 1990s, it tasted of nothing. The real thing required patience, whole spices, and that peculiar British faith in the transformative power of stale bread. Number 9. The washing up rota. After Sunday lunch, the washing up was a family event. There were no dishwashers in most homes in the 1970s. Your mum washed, your dad dried, the children put away. The hierarchy was fixed and unquestioned. The best china was washed separately by hand, in water that was not too hot, because the gold rim on the plates would wear off. The roasting tin was left to soak, because nothing could shift the baked-on fat without a good hour in hot, soapy water. Tea towels were draped over shoulders. The radio played. The washing up took 30 minutes, and it was, in its own way, the final act of the roast. The meal was not over until the last plate was back in the cupboard and the tablecloth was folded. That shared labor after a shared meal created a bond that loading a dishwasher and pressing a button simply cannot replicate. Your mum did not buy a joint that exactly fed the family. She deliberately bought bigger so there would be leftovers for Monday and Tuesday. Cold roast beef became sandwiches for Monday's tea, layered thick between slices of white bread with a smear of English mustard. Leftover lamb was minced and turned into shepherd's pie. Chicken carcasses were boiled for stock that became soup by Wednesday. Nothing was wasted because nothing was meant to be wasted. The Sunday roast was not one meal. It was 3 or 4 meals disguised as one. She knew exactly how many slices the joint would yield cold, how much meat would come off the bone for a hash, and whether the dripping would last until Thursday. That quiet engineering of the weekly food budget around a single joint was a skill so embedded it was never acknowledged. When we started buying just enough for one meal and throwing away leftovers, we did not save money. We lost a system that had worked for generations. Number 7. The pudding course. Sunday roast was never just meat and 2 veg. There was always a pudding. Your mum would have made it that morning or the day before. Apple crumble with custard, treacle sponge, spotted dick, rice pudding, and bread and butter pudding. The pudding course was not optional. It was the reward for finishing your vegetables, the full stop at the end of the meal. Families who did not serve pudding were talked about. The choice rotated through a set repertoire that rarely changed. Your mum might make the same 6 puddings in rotation for 30 years, and nobody ever complained because each one was perfect and familiar. When fresh fruit and yogurt replaced proper puddings in the 1990s, the Sunday roast lost its crescendo. A meal that once built towards a steaming golden climax now just faded away into something cold and disappointing. Number 6. The children's table. When extended family came for Sunday roast, which happened at least once a month, the children did not sit with the adults. They sat at a separate table, sometimes a folding card table set up in the corner or even in the kitchen. The children's table had its own rules. You could talk louder, you could eat faster, but you absolutely had to finish everything on your plate. Graduating from the children's table to the main table was a rite of passage that usually happened around age 12, and it meant something. It meant you were old enough to sit with the grown-ups and follow the conversation. That physical separation created anticipation and aspiration. The children's table vanished when families shrank and dining rooms became home offices. Number 5. Timing the Yorkshire pudding by ear. Your mum did not use a timer for the Yorkshire pudding. She listened. She knew the oven. She knew the sound the batter made as it hit the smoking fat, that violent hiss and spit. She knew that silence meant the pudding was rising. She could tell from the faintest smell of browning that 2 more minutes remained. Opening the oven door to check was forbidden, because the rush of cold air would collapse the rise. You trusted the process. You trusted your mum. And when she finally opened the oven and pulled out a tray of towering golden Yorkshires, puffed and magnificent, it felt like a small miracle. Every single time. Modern fan ovens with digital timers have made this instinct unnecessary, and with it, we lost the understanding that cooking is not following instructions. It is listening to what the food tells you. Number 4. The afternoon walk. After the washing up was done, the family went for a walk. This was not exercise. This was digestion. Your dad would announce that everyone was going out for some fresh air, and nobody argued because the house smelled of roast dinner and everyone needed to move. The walk followed a familiar route, through the park, along the canal, around the playing fields. It lasted exactly 1 hour. Children ran ahead. Parents walked arm in arm. The dog pulled at the lead. Neighbors were greeted. The walk was the decompression between the formality of the roast and the laziness of Sunday evening television. It connected the family to the neighborhood, to the seasons, to each other. When Sunday shopping was legalized in 1994, the afternoon walk lost its place to retail parks and garden centers. The streets that once filled with families walking off their roast fell quiet. Number 3. The Radio Times ritual. While the roast was in the oven, your dad sat with the Radio Times and planned the afternoon and evening television. This was not a casual browse. This was strategy. There were only 3 channels, and decisions had to be made. The family would negotiate what to watch after the walk, and your dad would circle the chosen programs with a biro. The Radio Times was a weekly purchase as reliable as the Sunday papers, arriving on a Thursday and surviving until the following Wednesday with increasingly dog-eared pages. The smell of roasting meat mixed with the rustle of magazine pages was the sensory signature of Sunday morning. When remote controls and hundreds of channels made planning unnecessary, the Radio Times lost its authority, and Sunday lost one of its small rituals of togetherness. Number 2. The best chair rule. Your dad had a chair. At the Sunday table, his seat was fixed and sacred. Nobody sat in it, not even when he was late. His chair was at the head of the table, closest to the carving board. Your mum sat at the opposite end, nearest the kitchen door, so she could fetch and carry. Children filled the sides. Guests were placed according to an invisible protocol that your mum managed without consultation. The seating arrangement was never discussed because it never changed. That fixed geography of the table created order and predictability. Everyone knew their place, literally and figuratively. When families stopped using dining tables and started eating from laps in front of the television, the best chair rule dissolved, and with it the last physical architecture of the family meal. Number 1. The silence before eating. Before a single fork was lifted, there was a pause. Not a formal grace in most homes by the 1970s, though some families still said one. It was a moment of quiet recognition, a beat when everyone looked at the table, at the spread of food, at each other, and acknowledged that this mattered. Your mum had spent the morning cooking. Your dad had carved. The children had laid the table. That brief silence before the first bite honored the effort. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Then your dad would say something like, "Right then," or "Tuck in," and the noise would begin. But those 3 seconds held everything. Gratitude, togetherness. The understanding that Sunday roast was not just a meal, but the one fixed point in a turning week. When we stopped pausing and started eating on the move, scrolling phones at the table, we did not just lose a habit. We lost the moment that made all the cooking worthwhile. Try bringing one of these back this Sunday. Just one. Lay the table properly. Make the gravy from the tin. Mix the mustard from powder. Or simply pause before you eat and look at what is in front of you. Then come back and tell me which one you chose. Drop it in the comments. These rituals deserve to be remembered.